The courtroom felt like a gladiator arena, marble walls towering overhead as David Martinez gripped his weathered briefcase with white knuckles. His faded work shirt stood in stark contrast to the wall of Italian silk suits across the aisle. Victoria Blackstone sat behind her seven-attorney fortress, every detail razor-sharp, from her platinum hair pulled into a merciless bun to the diamond watch that probably cost more than David's house. The air tasted metallic with fear and expensive perfume. Her glacier blue eyes dissected him like a specimen. "Your Honor, this man threatens to destroy everything I've built." The words sliced through silence with surgical precision. David's voice cracked like old leather. "I just want justice for Lucy." The courtroom held its breath. Then came the sound that changed everything. Heavy doors groaning open like a tomb unsealing. Two identical shadows fell across polished marble. 16. Tall. Unmistakably hers. Victoria's porcelain composure cracked down the middle. What her own twin sons were about to unleash would shatter more than just her empire. 3 months earlier, dawn painted David's kitchen in shades of amber and regret. The coffee maker wheezed like an old man climbing stairs, its familiar sound the only constant in a world that had tilted sideways 2 years ago. He stood at the counter, staring at the framed photo of 3 smiling faces. His wife. Sarah's laugh frozen in time, Lucy's gap-toothed grin, and his own younger self who still believed the world was fair. The empty space where Sarah's coffee mug once sat felt like a missing tooth. Noticeable every morning. His calloused fingers traced the photo's edge before the sound of small feet on hardwood broke his reverie. Lucy appeared in the doorway, wearing mismatched socks and bedhead that defied gravity. "Daddy, why does the pancake smell like burnt rubber?" Lucy wrinkled her nose, peering at the smoking pan with the curiosity of someone who had learned to expect culinary disasters. Her 8-year-old wisdom often surprised him, especially when it came to his cooking failures. David flipped the charcoal disc with resignation, knowing Sarah would have laughed at his domestic incompetence. "It's called extra crispy, sweetheart. Very gourmet." Lucy giggled, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Mommy used to say you could burn water." The casual mention hit him like a punch to the solar plexus, but he smiled anyway. Sarah lived on in Lucy's memories, and that was enough to keep breathing. The garage behind their modest house smelled of motor oil and possibility. David's weathered hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting the carburetor on Mrs. Patterson's ancient Buick while she watched from a folding chair, her knitting needles clicking like typewriter keys. The neighborhood had learned to bring their automotive ailments to David Martinez, not because he advertised, but because kindness traveled faster than gossip in small towns. His prices were fair, his work honest, and he never turned away anyone who couldn't pay immediately. The old woman's eyes crinkled with gratitude as the engine purred to life. "David, you're an angel in coveralls." He wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag, uncomfortable with praise. "Just fixing what's broken, Mrs. Patterson." Lucy sat cross-legged on the garage floor, organizing bolts by size, with the systematic focus that reminded him painfully of Sarah. His wife had possessed that same methodical mind, that engineer's approach to problems that had made her so good at her job. Before the accident that stole her away, she had been working on something important, a safety device that could have saved countless lives. The patent application still sat unfinished on his desk, a project he couldn't bear to complete, yet couldn't bring himself to abandon. Sarah's handwriting filled the margins, her brilliant mind captured in blue ink and technical diagrams. Every time he looked at those pages, he heard her voice explaining complex systems, with the patience of someone who truly understood innovation. The local news played on the small television mounted in the corner, its volume barely audible over the garage sounds. Victoria Blackstone's face appeared on screen, her cold beauty enhanced by professional lighting as reporters detailed her automotive empire's latest acquisition. David's hand stilled on the wrench, something dark flickering across his features as he watched the woman who commanded headlines and boardrooms with equal ruthlessness. The news anchor mentioned Blackstone Automotive's commitment to safety innovations, and David's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Lucy looked up from her bolt sorting, following her father's gaze to the screen. "She looks mean, Daddy." Children possessed an uncanny ability to see through adult facades, and Lucy's observation carried more truth than she realized. That evening, the mailbox held more than bills and advertisements. The legal document felt heavy in David's hands, its official seal and formal language creating a barrier between ordinary life and the approaching storm. He recognized the letterhead, Blackstone Industries' legal department, renowned for their aggressive tactics and unlimited resources. The summons outlined allegations that made his blood run cold, claims designed to destroy his reputation and strip away everything he had built. They accused him of fraud, of attempting to steal proprietary technology, of endangering his own daughter through negligence. Each word felt like a calculated blow, precisely aimed at his most vulnerable points. The document trembled in his grip as he realized Victoria Blackstone intended to crush him completely. David's small kitchen table became a battlefield, strewn with legal documents, patent applications, and photographs that told the story of his wife's final project. Sarah's safety device could have prevented the very type of accident that claimed her life, a cruel irony that kept him awake at night. The notification letter from the patent office lay beside Victoria's lawsuit, its timing too coincidental to ignore. He was finally ready to honor Sarah's memory by completing her work, and suddenly the most powerful woman in the automotive industry wanted him destroyed. The math was simple and terrifying. She knew what Sarah had discovered, and she would do anything to keep it buried. His hands shook as he spread the technical drawings across the table. Sarah's elegant engineering a stark contrast to the legal warfare being waged against her memory. Sleep became elusive as David researched his opponent, learning about the empire Victoria had built on calculated risks and ruthless efficiency. Blackstone Automotive dominated the market through aggressive acquisitions and innovative designs, but whispers of safety shortcuts and regulatory manipulation followed in their wake. The company's stock price soared, while families quietly grieved victims of preventable accidents, their settlements buried beneath non-disclosure agreements and corporate legal machinery. David discovered a pattern of whistleblowers who had suddenly changed careers or moved away, their silence purchased or coerced through methods that left no fingerprints. He was walking into a war zone armed with nothing but truth and stubbornness, facing an opponent who had never lost a battle that mattered. The first attorney's office smelled of leather and disappointment, its mahogany walls lined with law degrees and empty promises. David sat across from a man whose expensive suit couldn't hide his nervousness as he reviewed the case documents. The lawyer's hands trembled slightly as he read Victoria Blackstone's name, understanding immediately that this was not a fight his small firm could survive. "Mr. Martinez, I appreciate your situation, but this is beyond our capabilities." The rejection stung, but didn't surprise him. 5 more lawyers would deliver similar verdicts, each one recognizing the corporate death sentence that came with opposing Blackstone Industries. David found himself truly alone, facing an opponent with unlimited resources and a reputation for destroying anyone who dared challenge her authority. Victoria Blackstone's personal visit to his garage came like a midnight frost, unexpected and chilling. She arrived in a car that cost more than most houses, her presence transforming the humble workspace into something that felt suddenly inadequate. David didn't stop working on the engine he was rebuilding, his hands steady despite the electric tension that filled the air. "Mr. Martinez." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance, each syllable precisely enunciated. He looked up slowly, oil-stained fingers still gripping his wrench. Ms. Blackstone. The formal politeness masked volumes of unspoken hostility, two adversaries sizing each other up in the growing shadows of evening. Lucy peeked around the corner, her young instincts correctly identifying danger in their elegant visitor. "You have something that belongs to me," Victoria stated, her glacier eyes surveying the garage with barely concealed disdain. The safety device blueprints lay partially visible on his workbench, Sarah's handwriting still legible, despite 2 years of grief and procrastination. David straightened to his full height, suddenly aware of the oil stains on his coveralls and the vast gulf between their worlds. "I have something that belonged to my wife. She died because companies like yours put profits before people." Victoria's smile could have cut glass, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. "Your wife was a talented engineer. It would be tragic if her memory became tarnished by her husband's poor decisions." The threat hung between them like smoke, elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. The community rallied around David with the fierce loyalty that small towns reserve for their own under attack. Mrs. Patterson organized a prayer circle that met in the church basement, their weathered hands folded over Bibles as they invoked divine protection against corporate giants. Tom Bradley from the hardware store offered what legal expertise his business degree provided, while the Hendersons promised to testify about David's character if needed. Their support felt like armor against the coming storm, ordinary people standing up to extraordinary power because they recognized genuine goodness when they encountered it. Lucy watched these gatherings with wide eyes, beginning to understand that her father was fighting a battle much larger than fixing broken cars. The escalation came through official channels, dressed in legal language that couldn't hide its malicious intent. Social services received an anonymous tip about David's fitness as a single parent, triggering an investigation that felt like violation disguised as concern. The caseworker arrived with forms and suspicions, her questions probing for weakness, while David's neighbors watched from windows with barely contained outrage. Lucy clung to his hand during the interview, her small fingers transmitting fear through their connection. "Mr. Martinez, these are serious allegations about your parenting capabilities." The woman's clinical tone couldn't mask the fishing expedition, the desperate search for ammunition in Victoria's war against their family. David answered each question with quiet dignity, while rage burned like acid in his stomach. The investigation expanded like ink in water, touching every aspect of their lives with bureaucratic precision. Teachers received questionnaires about Lucy's behavior and emotional state. Neighbors found themselves answering questions about David's character and parenting skills. The garage faced inspection for safety violations, while Child Protective Services examined their home with the thoroughness of archaeologists seeking evidence of neglect. Lucy's bright spirit dimmed under the scrutiny, her easy laughter replaced by cautious glances toward adults who might carry clipboards in judgment. David held her close each night, whispering reassurances he wasn't sure he believed while the legal noose tightened around their necks. Victoria's next move came through her army of private investigators, men in dark suits, who asked questions about Sarah's accident with the persistence of bloodhounds following a scent. The medical examiner's office received requests for additional documentation. Insurance companies found themselves pressured to review their findings. Traffic cameras that should have captured the collision mysteriously experienced technical malfunctions during the critical time frame. Each inquiry felt like another shovel of dirt thrown on Sarah's grave, her death becoming raw material for corporate warfare. David discovered the true meaning of powerlessness as he watched his wife's memory dissected by strangers with expensive haircuts and flexible ethics. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, maintenance records that Sarah had meticulously filed in their home office, documents that proved the fatal brake failure stemmed from a known defect that Blackstone Automotive had chosen to hide rather than repair. The pattern emerged from Sarah's careful engineering analysis, her brilliant mind having identified the systematic flaw that would later claim her life. David's hands trembled as he read her notes, understanding that his wife had died, discovering the truth that Victoria was now desperate to bury. The safety device Sarah had been developing wasn't just an innovation, it was evidence of corporate negligence on a massive scale. Her death hadn't been an accident, but a consequence of calculated indifference to human life. The courtroom preparation consumed David's nights as he organized evidence with the methodical approach Sarah had taught him. Technical drawings spread across their kitchen table like battle plans, each document representing another nail in Victoria Blackstone's carefully constructed coffin of lies. The safety device blueprints revealed not just innovative engineering, but a direct refutation of Blackstone's claims about brake system reliability. Sarah's analysis predicted failure patterns with mathematical precision, her work showing that dozens of preventable deaths could be traced to the company's decision to prioritize profits over passenger safety. David felt his wife's presence in every calculation, her brilliant mind reaching across death to seek justice for herself and other victims. Lucy helped organize documents with the serious concentration of someone who understood the stakes without fully grasping their implications. Her small hands sorted papers into careful piles, while David explained what each folder represented in terms she could understand. "Daddy, will the mean lady go to jail?" The question carried such innocent faith in justice that David's throat tightened with emotion. He smoothed her hair with oil-stained fingers, unable to promise outcomes he couldn't guarantee. "We're going to tell the truth, sweetheart. Sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do." Lucy nodded solemnly, her 8-year-old wisdom accepting burdens that should belong to adults. Sarah's photograph watched over their work, her smile offering encouragement across the gulf of death. The evening before the trial, David sat alone in his garage, surrounded by the tools that had sustained his family through 2 years of grief. The safety device prototype lay partially assembled on his workbench, Sarah's engineering genius made tangible through metal and circuitry. His calloused hands traced the elegant design, feeling her presence in every perfectly calculated angle. Tomorrow, he would walk into that courtroom, carrying her memory and their daughter's future, armed with nothing but truth against an opponent who had never shown mercy to anyone standing in her path. The old clock on the garage wall ticked toward midnight, each second bringing him closer to a confrontation that would define the rest of their lives. Victoria Blackstone's confidence radiated from every pore as she entered the courthouse, flanked by her legal army, their synchronized movements suggesting military precision and unlimited resources. Reporters clustered around her like moths drawn to deadly flame, their cameras capturing every angle of her perfectly composed features. She paused at the courthouse steps, her smile containing just enough warmth to appear human, while her eyes remained cold as Arctic ice. "Justice will prevail today," she announced to the media, the words carrying implicit threats about what version of justice she intended to purchase. Her attorneys nodded approval, seasoned warriors who had conquered courtrooms through superior firepower, disguised as legal expertise. David's arrival created no media sensation, his solitary figure climbing the courthouse steps with the determined gait of someone carrying invisible weight. His only audience consisted of neighbors who had driven 30 miles to offer silent support, their weathered faces reflecting the anxiety he couldn't allow himself to feel. Mrs. Patterson clutched her rosary, while Tom Bradley adjusted his rarely worn tie, ordinary people gathering to witness their champion face impossible odds. Lucy remained at school, protected from the battlefield by teachers who understood that some fights were too adult for young eyes. David's worn briefcase contained everything he owned that mattered: Sarah's work, their daughter's future, and a faith in justice that felt increasingly naive with each passing moment. The judge's gavel fell like a guillotine blade, its sound echoing through marble halls that had witnessed countless battles between power and principle. Judge Harrison's weathered face suggested decades of legal warfare, his gray eyes moving between the opposing sides with the calculation of someone who understood that justice often arrived wearing expensive suits. Victoria's lead attorney rose with theatrical precision, his opening statement painting David as a desperate man whose grief had corrupted his judgment and threatened innocent lives. The words flowed like poison honey, sweet enough to seduce while deadly in their implications. David sat frozen as his character underwent systematic demolition, each accusation feeling like another nail in their family's coffin. "Your Honor," Victoria's attorney continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to reshaping truth through superior rhetoric. "This man seeks to profit from his wife's death by stealing proprietary technology that rightfully belongs to my client." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre, designed to transform grief into greed and love into larceny. David's hands clenched involuntarily as Sarah's memory became ammunition in corporate warfare, her brilliant engineering reduced to stolen goods in the mouth of a man who probably earned more each month than David made in a year. The courtroom gallery shifted uncomfortably, sensing the fundamental unfairness of watching a grieving widower face such overwhelming force alone. When David's turn came to respond, his voice carried none of the polished rhetoric that money could buy, only the raw honesty of someone who had lost everything that mattered and refused to surrender what remained. "Your Honor, my wife died because someone decided her life was worth less than their quarterly profits." The words emerged without calculation or legal strategy. Simple truth delivered with the force of genuine pain. He placed Sarah's engineering notebook on the evidence table, its pages filled with calculations that predicted her own death with mathematical precision. Victoria's composed mask flickered for the first time, a hairline crack and porcelain perfection that suggested she recognized the genuine article when confronted with it. The courtroom held its breath as David continued, his voice strengthening with each word. "Sarah Martinez was brilliant," David continued, his weathered hand steady as he held his wife's photograph toward the judge, her smile offering encouragement across death's divide. She identified safety flaws that could have saved hundreds of lives, including her own. The device she designed wasn't stolen technology. It was preventive medicine for corporate negligence. Victoria's attorneys rustled papers like nervous birds, their expensive training struggling against the simple power of truth delivered without artifice. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his experienced eyes recognizing authentic grief beneath David's careful composure. The safety device blueprints lay spread across the defense table like maps to buried treasure, Sarah's handwriting providing navigation through 2 years of loss and the promise of justice finally served. Victoria took the witness stand with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to controlling every variable in her environment. Her testimony flowed like rehearsed poetry, each answer calculated to maximum effect, while maintaining plausible deniability about her company's involvement in preventable deaths. She painted David as an unstable widower whose grief had metastasized into dangerous delusion, a narrative that transformed victim into villain through superior storytelling. "Mr. Martinez approached my company with threats and demands," she stated, her voice carrying just enough tremor to suggest vulnerability, while her eyes remained cold as deep space. The performance was flawless, designed to seduce judge and jury through the simple expedient of superior resources applied to the ancient art of character assassination. David's cross-examination felt like David facing Goliath without even a slingshot, his questions stumbling against Victoria's prepared responses like waves breaking against stone. She deflected every inquiry with practiced ease, her answers revealing nothing while implying everything about his mental instability and questionable motives. "Mr. Martinez, isn't it true that your wife's accident investigation concluded mechanical failure due to poor maintenance rather than manufacturing defect?" The question struck like a serpent, its poison disguised as reasonable inquiry. David's voice caught as he struggled to explain technical complexities that Victoria's legal team had spent months preparing to counter. The courtroom watched his composure crack under professional pressure. Ordinary decency, no match for unlimited resources and ruthless preparation. The afternoon session stretched like medieval torture, each question designed to strip away another layer of David's credibility while building Victoria's narrative of corporate innocence under attack by a grief-crazed widower. Her attorneys presented expert witnesses who transformed Sarah's safety concerns into engineering incompetence. Their testimony purchased with the same casual efficiency Victoria applied to all business transactions. David watched his wife's memory undergo systematic demolition, her brilliant analysis reduced to amateur speculation by men whose credentials couldn't hide their willingness to sell scientific integrity for corporate gold. Lucy's face appeared in his mind like a lifeline, her trust in his ability to seek justice becoming the only thing that kept him from surrendering to overwhelming odds. Judge Harrison called for afternoon recess with the grim expression of someone who had witnessed too many David versus Goliath stories end in predictable tragedy. David slumped in his chair, surrounded by legal documents that felt increasingly useless against Victoria's superior firepower. His neighbors offered encouragement, with the desperate optimism of people watching their champion face impossible odds, their weathered faces reflecting his own growing certainty that truth alone might not be sufficient weapons against unlimited resources and professional deception. The courthouse hallway buzzed with whispered speculation about the inevitable outcome, reporters already crafting stories about corporate justice prevailing over individual delusion. David stared at Sarah's photograph, silently apologizing for his inability to honor her memory with victory. Victoria's confidence radiated like heat from summer pavement as she conferred with her legal team, their synchronized movements suggesting military precision applied to courtroom warfare. She had dominated every exchange, controlled every narrative, and purchased every advantage that money could provide in pursuit of total victory. David Martinez represented nothing more than an annoying speed bump on her highway to continued dominance, a grieving widower whose pathetic attempt at justice would serve as warning to future challenges against her authority. The afternoon testimony would complete his destruction, leaving him broken and discredited, while her empire continued expanding without inconvenient moral constraints. Her diamond watch caught afternoon sunlight streaming through tall windows, its brilliance reflecting off surfaces like scattered starlight in gathering darkness. The heavy oak doors groaned open with the sound of destiny announcing itself, their protest echoing through marble halls like thunder before lightning strikes. Every head turned toward the commotion as two figures emerged from courthouse shadows, their identical faces carrying expressions of determination that transformed the entire atmosphere with electric tension. Alex and Ryan Blackstone walked down the center aisle with the synchronized precision of soldiers advancing into battle, their 16-year-old features bearing unmistakable resemblance to the woman whose composure had just shattered like expensive crystal hitting concrete floors. Victoria's hands froze mid-gesture, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the color draining from her face as maternal recognition warred with corporate self-preservation instincts. "Your Honor," Alex spoke first, his voice carrying the technological confidence of someone raised in the digital age. "We have evidence that will change everything you've heard today." Ryan stepped forward with moral certainty that reminded observers why teenagers had historically led revolutions against entrenched power, his young face reflecting integrity that money couldn't purchase or corruption couldn't taint. Victoria's attorneys erupted in procedural objections, their expensive training struggling against the simple power of unexpected truth delivered by witnesses they hadn't prepared to discredit. Judge Harrison's experienced eyes moved between the boys and their mother, recognizing family drama that had just transformed legal proceeding into something approaching Greek tragedy, with modern technology providing the deus ex machina. "Mom," Ryan's voice cut through courtroom chaos like a blade through silk, his words carrying disappointment that hurt more than any legal defeat Victoria could imagine. "We know what you did." Alex raised a smartphone with the casual confidence of someone who had grown up understanding that technology could preserve truth more effectively than human memory, its digital storage containing evidence that would reshape everything everyone thought they understood about corporate power and family loyalty. Victoria's perfectly composed facade cracked like ice under sudden pressure, revealing glimpses of genuine fear beneath layers of professional armor. The courtroom held its collective breath as two teenagers prepared to testify against their own mother, justice arriving wearing the faces of children who had chosen moral courage over filial obligation. "We recorded everything," Alex continued, his technical expertise evident in the way he handled digital evidence with practiced ease, having spent months documenting his mother's transformation from distant parent into something approaching corporate monster. The smartphone speaker filled courtroom silence with Victoria's voice, discussing cover-up strategies and witness intimidation with the casual efficiency she applied to all business decisions, her recorded words destroying 2 hours of careful testimony in 30 seconds of devastating revelation. Ryan's eyes never left his mother's face as her own voice condemned her, his expression carrying the weight of someone forced to choose between family loyalty and moral responsibility. Victoria's legal team scrambled like ants whose hill had been kicked over, their expensive strategies useless against evidence they hadn't known existed. The recordings painted a picture of corporate negligence so systematic that even Judge Harrison's experienced composure showed cracks, his weathered face reflecting growing outrage as Victoria's voice detailed safety shortcuts and regulatory manipulation with the casual indifference of someone discussing weather patterns. Sarah Martinez's safety analysis had been absolutely correct, her engineering brilliance having identified flaws that Victoria's company had known about and chosen to ignore rather than fix. David sat frozen as his wife's vindication played through courthouse speakers, her memory finally receiving the justice that death had delayed but not denied. The safety device wasn't stolen technology, but evidence of murder by corporate indifference, its development representing Sarah's attempt to prevent other families from experiencing the loss that her own discoveries had made inevitable. "She was trying to save lives," Ryan testified, his 16-year-old voice carrying authority that Victoria's expensive attorneys couldn't challenge without appearing to attack childhood itself, including her own. But Mom decided profits were more important than people. Alex displayed technical documentation with the precision of someone who understood that truth required evidence, his smartphone revealing email chains and executive communications that proved Victoria had known about brake system failures months before Sarah's accident. The safety device blueprints weren't theft, but revelation. Sarah's engineering genius having identified solutions to problems that Blackstone Automotive preferred to hide rather than solve. Victoria watched her empire crumble through testimony delivered by the sons she had raised, their moral courage inherited from grandparents she had hoped they would never emulate. Judge Harrison's gavel fell with the finality of divine judgment, its sound echoing through marble halls like thunder announcing the end of storms. "Ms. Blackstone, you will surrender all patents related to the disputed technology immediately. Mr. Martinez will receive full compensation for his wife's development work, plus punitive damages for corporate malfeasance." Victoria's legal team sat in stunned silence, their expensive training, insufficient preparation for defeat, delivered by teenage witnesses whose testimony couldn't be purchased or intimidated. David felt Sarah's presence like warm sunlight breaking through winter clouds, her memory finally vindicated by sons who had chosen justice over family loyalty. The courtroom erupted in subdued celebration as ordinary people witnessed extraordinary victory. Corporate power finally held accountable by the simple expedient of recorded truth. The courthouse steps felt different under afternoon sunlight, their marble surface warm with the promise of justice finally delivered to those who deserved it most. David emerged, carrying Sarah's vindication and legal documents that transformed her death from random tragedy into catalyst for corporate accountability. Her brilliant engineering finally receiving recognition that might prevent other families from experiencing similar loss. Alex and Ryan flanked their mother as reporters clustered like vultures sensing carry-on, their cameras capturing the moment when unlimited corporate power met its match in teenage moral courage. Victoria's composed mask had finally shattered completely, revealing genuine human emotion beneath layers of professional armor that money had been unable to repair once truth emerged from digital storage devices. Why? Victoria's question emerged as barely audible whisper, her glacier eyes searching her sons' faces for explanation that might restore some fragment of the control she had spent decades accumulating through superior resources and ruthless efficiency. Ryan's answer carried the weight of someone forced to choose between family loyalty and moral responsibility, his 16-year-old wisdom exceeding his mother's despite decades of experience. Because someone had to stop you before more people died. Alex nodded agreement, his technical expertise having provided the tools for justice, while his brother supplied the moral courage necessary for difficult choices. Their testimony had transformed from family betrayal into public service, teenage rebellion channeled toward corporate accountability in ways that would reshape how power operated in boardrooms across the country. David approached the boys with gratitude so profound that words felt inadequate, his weathered hands shaking as he grasped their shoulders with the gentle strength of someone who understood sacrifice when he encountered it. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion that 2 years of grief had been unable to drain completely. "Your mother raised good sons, despite everything else." The observation carried no irony, only recognition that moral courage often emerged from unexpected sources, and that teenage idealism sometimes provided better guidance than adult pragmatism. Victoria watched the interaction with expressions cycling between maternal pride and professional devastation, her empire's collapse witnessed by the children whose moral development had apparently proceeded independently of her corporate indoctrination. The legal settlement transformed David's financial situation overnight, corporate accountability arriving with the same devastating efficiency that Victoria had once applied to crushing opposition. Sarah's safety device would finally receive proper development and implementation, her brilliant engineering preventing the type of accidents that had claimed her own life with mathematical precision that felt like justice delivered from beyond death. The patent applications bore her name as primary inventor, ensuring that history would remember her contributions rather than corporate theft disguised as innovation. David established a foundation in Sarah's memory. Its mission statement focused on automotive safety research and support for families affected by preventable mechanical failures. The money couldn't resurrect his wife, but it could honor her memory through systematic prevention of similar tragedies. 6 months later, David's garage had evolved into something approaching a community center, its humble walls expanded to accommodate the vocational training program that taught neighborhood kids practical skills while honoring Sarah's legacy through technical education. Lucy helped organize tools with the same methodical precision her mother had demonstrated, her grief transformed into purpose through meaningful work that connected past sacrifice with future possibility. The safety device prototype sat in a place of honor on the main workbench, its elegant engineering drawing visitors who wanted to understand how one woman's brilliance had challenged corporate negligence and ultimately prevailed through posthumous vindication. Students traced its mechanisms with reverent fingers, learning that individual integrity could triumph over systemic corruption when armed with sufficient courage and proper documentation. Victoria's relationship with her sons had begun healing through shared acknowledgement of moral complexity that even teenagers could navigate better than adults, whose judgment had been corrupted by unlimited resources and competitive pressure. Alex continued developing technological skills while Ryan explored legal studies, both boys having discovered that their mother's failures provided valuable lessons about power's responsibilities rather than just its privileges. Family dinners included conversations about corporate ethics and social responsibility, topics that Victoria approached with the humility of someone whose worldview had undergone fundamental reconstruction through devastating revelation. Their testimony had saved her from criminal prosecution while forcing personal accountability that money couldn't purchase or influence couldn't avoid. The old church clock chimed 8 as David walked Lucy home from the garage, her small hand warm in his calloused grip, while evening shadows stretched across familiar streets that felt safer now that justice had finally arrived for those who deserved it most. Sarah's photograph smiled from their kitchen table, surrounded by homework assignments and community program applications that demonstrated how death could catalyze positive change when memory was honored through meaningful action rather than simple grief. Lucy's laughter filled spaces that had been silent too long, her young voice carrying hope that extended beyond their small family toward broader community that had rallied around them during the darkest period of corporate intimidation and legal warfare. "Daddy," Lucy asked as they paused beneath streetlights that illuminated their path toward home and healing, "do you think Mommy knows we won?" David squeezed her hand gently, Sarah's watch ticking steadily against his wrist, where he had moved it from the bedside table drawer, where grief had hidden it for 2 years of avoidance and regret. "I think she's proud of how brave you were through everything, sweetheart." The observation carried truth that extended beyond simple reassurance toward recognition that 8-year-old resilience had provided strength he hadn't possessed alone. Sarah's legacy lived on through their daughter's courage and the community program that would teach future generations to value integrity over immediate gain, technical competence over corporate corruption. The Foundation's first annual dinner brought together families affected by preventable automotive accidents, their shared stories creating community among survivors who had previously grieved alone. David spoke briefly about Sarah's work and Victoria's accountability, his words carrying the quiet authority of someone who had faced impossible odds and discovered that truth possessed power that money couldn't purchase or influence couldn't corrupt. Alex and Ryan attended with their mother, their presence demonstrating that redemption remained possible even for those whose corporate power had been built on systematic indifference to human cost. Victoria's remarks focused on accepting responsibility and supporting safety research, her transformation from antagonist to reluctant ally, proving that even the most hardened hearts could crack under sufficient moral pressure applied by the right witnesses at the proper time. The evening concluded with Lucy presenting the first Sarah Martinez Memorial Scholarship to a young woman studying automotive engineering, her 8-year-old voice steady as she explained how her mother's work continued protecting families through education and innovation rather than corporate secrecy and regulatory manipulation. The recipient's eyes shone with tears as she accepted recognition that connected personal tragedy with future prevention. Sarah's legacy extending beyond individual family toward broader community that valued technical competence over profit maximization. David watched from the audience, his wife's photograph tucked safely in his jacket pocket, while her memory lived on through programs that transformed grief into purpose, loss into legacy, and individual sacrifice into systemic change that would protect countless families from experiencing similar devastation. That night, as Lucy slept peacefully in her room, decorated with engineering drawings and automotive safety posters that reflected her mother's continuing influence. David sat in his kitchen reviewing foundation applications, from families seeking support after losing loved ones to preventable mechanical failures. Sarah's safety device had entered mass production, its elegant engineering preventing the type of accidents that had claimed her life while generating royalties that funded ever-expanding programs focused on technical education and corporate accountability. The irony wasn't lost on him. Death had ultimately catalyzed life-saving innovation, individual loss had generated community healing, and corporate greed had been defeated by teenage moral courage, armed with digital technology and sufficient determination to choose justice over family loyalty when the two proved incompatible. The story had spread beyond their small Nebraska town, inspiring other families to challenge corporate negligence with the same combination of technical evidence and moral determination that had brought Victoria Blackstone to accountability. Legal precedents established during their case provided templates for future challenges against systematic safety shortcuts, while the recording techniques Alex had pioneered offered technological tools for documenting corporate malfeasance that traditional legal discovery couldn't uncover. Sarah's engineering analysis had become required reading in automotive safety courses, her brilliant mind finally receiving recognition that death had delayed but not denied. Victoria's transformation from corporate predator to reluctant advocate proved that even the most hardened opposition could be overcome through sufficient pressure applied by witnesses whose testimony couldn't be purchased or intimidated. As midnight approached and the house settled into familiar creaks and whispers of a home filled with love rather than grief, David touched Sarah's watch and whispered the gratitude that had sustained him through 2 years of loss and 1 season of impossible victory. Lucy stirred in her sleep, her dreams probably filled with automotive innovations and community programs that honored her mother's memory through meaningful action rather than simple mourning. The safety device prototype gleamed on his workbench, its mechanisms ready to prevent tragedies that would otherwise destroy families like corporate indifference had almost destroyed his own. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and fresh opportunities to expand Sarah's legacy, but tonight offered the rare satisfaction of knowing that truth had prevailed over power. Love had conquered greed, and individual sacrifice had generated systemic change that would protect countless lives for generations yet to come. Sometimes justice arrives wearing the faces of teenage sons who choose moral courage over family loyalty, armed with smartphones that preserve truth more effectively than human memory. Sometimes corporate empires crumble beneath the weight of recorded evidence delivered by witnesses whose testimony can't be purchased or intimidated. And sometimes, love proves stronger than death. Technical brilliance transcends individual mortality, and ordinary families discover that they possess power sufficient to hold unlimited corporate resources accountable for systematic indifference to human cost. David Martinez learned these lessons through grief and victory, loss and vindication, discovering that Sarah's death hadn't been the end of her story, but rather the beginning of changes that would ripple outward like stones thrown into still water, creating waves that would reach shores he couldn't imagine from his small Nebraska garage, where healing continued one repaired engine at a time.